afternoon, and thank you for joining today's webinar, Confronting the Elephant in the Room, Overcoming the 7 Roadblocks to Success. My name is Sarah Gonzalez. I'm an employee of Redback Conferencing and your facilitator for today's session. Today's webinar is all about effective communication. We will be discussing the results of 2 studies and uncovering issues that very rarely get addressed. Today's webinars are Peter Knight and Kate Groom. Peter runs an accounting practice, coaches businesses and accounting firms, and serves on several boards. And Kate is an expert in financial communication, a business advisor, and a franchising guru. How are you both today, guys?
Going really well.
Excellent. I'll now hand it over to the 2 of you to start the webinar.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sarah, and it's a pleasure to be here. So just by way of introduction as to how Peter and I got into doing what we're doing, we actually met a number of years ago when we were training bankers to speak to business owners. And as we did that, we discovered that people have a lot of difficulty trying to make sense of figures. And we spent most of our lives trying to help individual business owners do that well, and ended up working together on presentations to help business owners make sense of financial and business information and use it to help their businesses go better. And that was the foundation for the work that we started to do, trying to understand about financial communication in business. To make this go down. There we go. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. A quick look at how the agenda is going to run. We've already done the welcome and introduction. What we're going to talk about next is the surveys that we've done about financial communication and the things that send a business broke. We'll take you through the 7 things that we've identified that will either send a business broke or cause a department to fail in their day-to-day operations. And we'll get some practical communication tips that will help you communicate better in your workplace and take some questions at the end. So let's get into it. Why this, why now? A friend of mine the other day said, Kate, why are you talking about what sends a business broke and what causes them to fail? It's not a very happy topic. And, well, really, it isn't. But lots of businesses and organisations face challenges around survival in the climate that we've got. They are tough times, and we see that in the business that we do. Lots of people are finding it a bit of a struggle. And when we sit and listen to the smart people in banks, they tell us it's likely to stay this way. We're going to see a soft economy for the foreseeable future. And both Pete and I have spent a lot of time working with business owners, and we've seen that the costs and consequences of a business not working out are really significant, not just for the organisation, when either an organisation or a part of that organisation collapses, but also the personal implications for the people who work there and the social implications. And if your business isn't going that well, or the work that you're doing isn't going terrifically well, chances are you're going to be taking that home. So we are really focused on doing what we can to help people do better in their businesses and in their workplaces so that those stress factors go away as far as we can make that happen. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So with that introduction done, let's get into it. Hey.
One of the things that I was involved with, part of the work that I do with CPA Australia, was doing some talks right around the country. And I got interested in understanding what people were thinking when they were dealing with the accountant, or when the accountant was dealing with all the different people that they deal with. So I was doing some talks in different locations around the country, and basically ran a survey. And at every time I had an opportunity to speak to some people, I asked this question and got the answers. What are your frustrations when you're having financial conversations? And this is the response. 58% of people said the biggest frustration is a lack of understanding, or in other words, there's actually a knowledge gap. And then the next highest response was 10% said people don't listen. So just remember, this is surveying accountants. So the accountants are saying the people they talk to, they don't understand, and then they said they don't listen. So I looked at those two answers. So 58%, that's nearly 6 out of 10, and then 10%. I thought, well, maybe they're not that different. I actually wondered whether people don't listen because they don't understand. And because there is that knowledge gap, they just don't listen. So if that is the case, 7 out of 10 people just don't understand what we as accountants are talking about. What I found interesting was this, that last bullet point you can see on the slide, 88% or nearly 9 out of 10 accountants want to be able to communicate better. So they're aware, they're actually a bit frustrated that the words that are coming out of their mouth actually aren't landing and people don't understand what they're saying. Okay. What was interesting was then to cross-check these results with business owners. And the business owners were from a whole range of different sectors. So from corporates, large corporates, top 100 companies, through to a range of SMEs, small, medium enterprises. Also surveyed franchise groups and bookkeepers, and the results were pretty much the same. So what we found was accountants were frustrated that the clients, or who they were speaking to, didn't understand, and the results cross-checked that business owners, or those that were listening to the accountant, actually did not understand what they were saying. Here are some of the things that they said. These are direct quotes from the surveys. I don't really understand what the accountant is saying to me. I don't really know what I'm doing. I feel like a fraud. I'm just waiting to get found out. Now that was from a CEO of an organisation, a multi-million-dollar organisation. I like this. I was concerned about this last one, and I think this is coming through again and again. People get promoted, and it's expected they know this stuff, but no one ever shows them or explains it. So over to you, Kate, for this next one, just to run through why it's of interest.
So that's a great question. Obviously, accounting people get a lot of excitement talking about accounting type things, but really, why would the rest of us be at all interested in understanding and doing better at communicating about finance? Well, a couple of reasons. Firstly, if you're a financial person, it's really great to be able to be understood by other people in your organisation, because you won't get that glazed over thing happening. If you're a more non-financial person, the reason this becomes compelling in terms of a thing to know about is that it just helps you make a better contribution to your organisation. Every one of us, whether we think about whether we know it or not, has an effect on the financial results and the sustainability of the organisations that we work in as a result of what we do every day. So understanding how the numbers part of it works really just helps you do a better job. It helps you progress in your career and give you more opportunities. And certainly that's true as you go up the career ladder. Knowing and understanding about finance really makes a difference. And being able to communicate that to anybody in an organisation is really helpful. So we reckon it helps everybody. Whatever the role is you are in a company, understanding about the numbers really makes a difference. Okay, I'll talk about the second survey. So what happened then after we looked at the financial side of things was that we ran a survey to try and understand the relationship between financial conversations and what causes a business to fail. And we became very interested in that. And we asked a whole lot of people what they knew about what causes a business to fail or a part of an organisation to collapse. And we came up with 7 things. And we're going to talk about those 7 today. The 7 are: something changed, something goes wrong at the start in a business, you don't have enough business rigour. Amazingly, some businesses do crazy things that don't help them out in the long term. Some businesses struggle just because they don't have enough income. One of our particular favorites is that pride and ego gets in the way, as it does in lots of things, and sometimes we're just not looking out the front of the bus. So those are the 7 things as a snapshot. We're going to dive into them and look at them in some more detail now. And we're going to do this as a bit of a countdown. So now that you know what the 7 are, you might be guessing about which one is the number 1, and also if you've got a particular favorite as we go through this list. The first one is that something changed. And it isn't just that something changed, but that we didn't spot it or respond to it. One of the people in our survey said this: people still do the same things that worked for them prior to the GFC, but the market has changed significantly since then. Now, we all know about the GFC. I was in the fortunate position of making a decision to move to America just as it got started. So I know what it looked like right at the beginning, and it was pretty ugly. But what sometimes we forget is that it does have a lasting effect, and we don't pay attention to that. We don't adjust for it. A good way to think about this is to think about a couple of frogs sitting in a pan of water, and you can see that down at the bottom of the slide there. Apparently, if you toss a frog into a pan of boiling water, it notices that the water is pretty hot and it leaps out. But if you sit in the water for long enough from cold, you'll adjust to that and cook gently on top of the stove. That's the same challenge that many of us have when we're dealing with change. We actually don't respond to it in the right way. We just settle in and get used to it. And it can cause a big problem for our business. So we know that the GFC caused a huge drop in economic activity and had a massive effect on businesses and borrowing and finance. But many people have forgotten that those effects are lasting and that they cause things to happen in business and that we need to adjust to. For example, we do a lot of work in franchising, and to buy a franchise business, you need to borrow money. It's a little bit more difficult to borrow it now. So if you run a business that relies on somebody borrowing money, that means you've got to change something if you want to survive. Those are the types of things that go on around us all the time that we often just don't notice and don't respond to. So in the businesses that you're in, the chances are you're being affected by the change in the financial environment as well. The question really is, what is that doing for you, and how are you responding to it? So that's a fairly academic one. Let's turn to something a little bit more practical, technology. We all know that technology has changed our lives. Before this talk today, we were comparing phones and how we use the internet. We all know that it makes a huge difference. You'll see there some of the fascinating, trivial statistics about technology. Apparently, there are 100 billion searches on Google every month, and a scarily large amount of new information that's out there. Why does this make a difference, and why is it of any relevance at all? Well, the way that we deal with information affects how we do business. And if we don't think about that in the right way, and we don't think about it in a business sense, we just miss the implications of it. So, for example, in the US a number of years ago, a teacher was asked to give a presentation on the topic of change, and they made a little video called Shift Happens, and you'll see that that's mentioned there. You might want to look at that later. What that was about was the impact of technology on education. That's a great way to think about change, which is to look at what's changing in the world and think about how it affects how you do what you do every day. So now as you start to think about the business that you're in, what are some of the other factors that might affect how you do what you do? Social things like our buying and spending habits, where people choose to use their money, how we communicate in the workplace, hugely impacted by things like technology as we develop new habits. If you're in a not-for-profit, political changes, policy changes all affect how you do what you do and how your business goes. The challenge for us, though, is to get from the theory of this, which we can kind of all see, to the practical aspects of what does it mean for us. And often that's what we miss. We miss looking at the impact on our own businesses and our own organizations and then responding to them. And so what we want to encourage you to do is to think, well, what are the things that have changed in our business environment, and how does that affect us, and how should we be responding to it? Do we need to be thinking about new and creative ways to get revenue for our business? Do we need to be thinking about how we train our people differently to give them new skills to cope in this type of environment? And do we need to be innovating and finding new processes to do what we do so we can be more effective and more efficient, maybe in a world where there's a bit less money to go around? So how do you do that? Well, the first step is to be interested and have a look around. Don't just read the newspapers and go to conferences to gather random information. Get interested in what is happening and how it affects you. And a great book to read that will stimulate you on this one, if you happen to be a reader, is the one called Our Iceberg is Melting. If you haven't read that, it's a great read, and it encourages you to look around and do something when you notice that there is a change happening. Once you've noticed there's something happening, figure out a process in your organization to identify what the issues are and how you should be responding to that. That might mean gathering a group of people together. And sometimes it helps to get outside input into the process. Sometimes the outsider is the person who can see what's happened differently or present it to you in a way that is different and more compelling and causes you to take action, not just observe the melting of the iceberg or the cooking of the frog and say, isn't that curious?
What I think is interesting here, we've got a message come through from one of the listeners, from Karen, saying people usually do the same thing again and again because they don't know what else to do. I think there's a lot of truth there in that, because we tend to just get stuck in the routine of doing what we're doing without, and I know we're going to look at this later, without taking the approach of the meerkat and getting up, looking over the horizon and seeing sort of what's coming and what's ahead of us.
I agree, and actually I think many of the challenges that our businesses and our organizations face are ones where it takes a group of people to figure out the solution. It may well be that one person doesn't know what to do, but somebody somewhere else does. So that's a great way to think about it too.
Yeah, it's got an impact on leadership too, because oftentimes there'll be ideas and thoughts coming through from those, do I say, lower in the ranks, trying to push it upstream. But some of the management are threatened by some of these ideas and think, no, I don't want to implement that. It may make me look bad.
And we'll get to that one as well. Yeah. I think we have it all here. So that's number 7. Let's move on to number 6. I like number 6. It's one of my favorite ones. And if you're not in a startup, this one might seem a bit curious. When we ask people about what causes a business or a part of an organization to fail, they say, well, you see, they were up against it right from the beginning. I like to think of this one being a bit like the honeymoon's over. So we can imagine what that's like. It looks like it's going to be fantastic, but actually not quite so easy once you get into it. Now, when we talk to people about what happens in startups, they'll say they don't work out because you ran out of money, the people didn't have the skills necessary, or you didn't make changes that you need to make. So is that relevant if you're not in a startup? We think absolutely they really are. So let's get back to the honeymoon being over. So we know what it's like. We take on a new department. Somebody says, congratulations, you are now running this part of the business, or you've now got a great new job, and it seemed like it was fantastic. And you get in there, and you lift the lid, and it doesn't quite go the way that you expected, because reality rarely works out according to the plan. So at that point, what do you do? You're in there now, and you've got the business with not enough budget, or a budget that's been cut. Problems that they didn't tell you about or you didn't ask about. Those skeletons in the cupboard that apparently show up in every job. And I know what that's like, because I took on a job that was exactly like that. Somebody said, congratulations, we think you do a great job. Why don't you go and run this company? And it was fantastic, but there were quite a few things that needed to be fixed. And very often when that happens, we discover that even though we reckon we're pretty much the rock star and we've got what we need to make it work, actually a whole new set of skills are needed to do the job that needs to be done. So that's what we've got to deal with. Now, there's 2 choices at that point, really, pretty much. You can either take it on or run away. So we reckon this is kind of like the honeymoon being over too. Once you get back from the honeymoon, you've still got to make it work. So how do you do that? You work with what you've got. in our world, really that goes down to a couple of important things. Firstly, get to grips with the financial reality. When you discover that something that you're responsible for or you're taking on isn't going the way that it should be, quite often you'll discover there's some sort of financial problem. So what that might mean is that there isn't as much budget as you thought, the cash flow isn't that great, you don't understand the figures, or it's not making money. What do we need to do to deal with that? We think that looking at the numbers regularly is really important, even if the numbers don't look that great. Figure out a program to improve the performance of what it is that you've got, and teach the people around you how to understand what makes a business work.
I just want to cut in there. There's a couple of things that I just really want to highlight because they are the answers, these 3 points. When we talk about ongoing reporting, that means looking back. It means looking backwards out of the bus. That's only of use if you can learn from it. Looking back and seeing where we've been doesn't add anything to anything unless we can learn the lessons from that. So what have we learned from looking backward, and particularly if it's not pretty? We don't want to keep looking at reports if they're just going to continue to show a bad situation. It's really about what can we learn from that, what improvements can we make, and let's look out the front of the bus. Where are we going? What do we need to put in place to make sure that we actually do get there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was talking to somebody the other day who's recently taken on a new business responsibility and really wanted to make a difference to the way the finances of that business was going, and took a great initiative, which was just once a month to put the figures up on the wall, get the sales figures up, look at the profitability, have their team understand the numbers, and then figure out what they need to do to improve the revenue in that organization. And they don't make it a huge deal, but progressively over the last 6 or 7 months, that's made a massive difference to the revenue in that organization just by looking at the numbers. So it does make a difference, even if you start with just some very simple things. The second part of the suggestions on number 6 that we just really love is get clarity and focus about where you're going. You've got what you've got. You've figured out where the skeletons are, where the bodies are buried. So then the challenge is, how do we get to a better place? And there's 3 simple steps to that. Only 3 questions you really need to ask. Where are we now? Where are we going? And how are we going to get there? So take stock of what's going on right now. Look at the numbers. Look at what you've got to work with. Decide where it is that you want to get to, and then take some actions to progress in that direction. And it may seem really simple, but those 3 steps really work almost every time.
Yeah, they are the steps. And some of you will go home at the end of each day and say, oh, that place where I work, they just drive me crazy, and I know you'll use more colourful language than that. And if you've had budget cuts, you're going to be thinking, we just can't do this, and you feel like throwing your hands up in the air. That's okay, just to feel a bit sorry for yourself. You've got to wake up the next day and go back in there and do something about it, unless you're going to leave. If you're not going to leave, you've got to, there's probably 4 words that you have to have as your mantra. Suck it up, sunshine. You just got to get in there and do it. There's only 2 things to do. You've only got 2 choices in life: accept it, do something about it, or do nothing. So we say, get in there and do something about it. So if you've had a budget cut, or if you can see that things aren't as good as you thought they were, no sense crying about it. Sure, shed a tear if you need to. But once you get into it, sit down, take time out, away from the hustle and bustle, go into a quiet space, maybe with your executive team or just a few of you, and have a thinking session or a planning session. Say, right, this is what we've got. Step number 1, where are we now? Where do we want this thing to go? And that may just be survival. What do we have to do to at least survive? Map it out, the cash flow forecast, map where the money's going to come from, where it's going to go, what you need to survive. That's as a minimum. And then take it to the next step. What do we have to do from then on to get a bit of a profit or a bit of a surplus? And then what are the actions that we will take on a regular basis to bring that home?
That's great. Thanks, Pete. And just before we let Pete loose on a couple of points, Jessica's got a great point there. Some people think planning is a waste of time because they're too busy doing stuff.
That's quite nice. Thanks, Jessica. We absolutely agree.
I think we do it. Well, we don't agree with it in the sense that planning isn't a waste of time. Now, if we spend all of our time just planning, nothing's ever going to get done, and there's no point in having the best written plan if you're not actually making it happen. But certainly from my experience, it is worth having some sort of a plan for where you want to get to and how you're going to get there. The best examples that I've got of that are actually from small business that I've worked with, where from time to time many small businesses face pretty significant difficulties, and some of them get right to the edge of going broke. And nearly always the best step to take is to have those people just step back, take a look at where they're at, make a simple plan, just a few action points on a piece of paper, and then keep moving forward from there. And what it does is it just organizes all the mess and the chaos in your brain into something that you can do something with and that somebody else can help you with. And very often it is just that sorting through and getting structure that gives you clarity and focus so that you don't get distracted by whatever rolls past your desk. So yes, the many people are challenged with planning. I've got to say I used to find it a challenge, but we had many years of having planning sessions, and now I look back at the documents that got produced and the actions that we did, and I know that if we hadn't taken the time to think through our business and think about where it was going, we wouldn't have had the results that we had. So great question, and you're not on your own, but it is worth doing that activity.
Yeah, and my view on planning is, do you need to go away to the mountain and have a weekend retreat? I don't know. Yesterday I spoke at a conference. It was up the Blue Mountains up in west of Sydney. And these guys had been going from Sunday. I spoke yesterday on the Monday, and they're still going today. So a 3-day planning session. You need 3 days. That's going to set the agenda for the year. It's too big. So you've got to break it down to something you can actually work with. So from a whole annual planning meeting, you've got to break that down to 1 month chunks, maybe every quarter or something like that. But you've got to bring it down to what are we going to do on Tuesday? What are we going to do next week? If we have the big goals, they're just too big. You can't just get your head around it all. It needs to come down to practical steps and down to the level of weekly action. So what I see is most effective is have a quick weekly meeting at the start of the week on a Monday, go around the table, what do you want to make sure you achieve this week? And then on the Friday, the end of the week, just say, how did you go? And whether that's a team of 2 or 3 people or a team of up to 10, maybe 15 people, by making sure you're getting through at least 5, 6, 10 things in a week, and you add them up cumulatively, it'll be a massive achievement by the end of the week. That then forms part of a big productive year.
Yeah.
Okay. The next one, this is actually one of my favourites, lack of business rigour. Business rigour. This is the thing that we see. These are the typical issues. Number one is a lack of commercial understanding. We actually think, and Sarah coined this, Sarah's our facilitator today, that finance is the elephant in the room. We all know it's important. We all know it's critical. Not many of us understand it, but we just don't talk about it. The thing is, by doing that, just like Jessica said, we're busy, we run around, we keep ourselves, most of us are busy, flat out doing stuff. Is it worthwhile? Maybe not. So having the business rigour number one, a monthly meeting. Have it at a regular time, at a regular place, where everybody knows what's going on. We'll come through some of these things later for some of the tips. There needs to be business and financial and business information. Now, sometimes there's too much. Sometimes the accountants get a little bit crazy and start pouring out floods of information. That then just gets hard to wade your way through it all. Sometimes there's too little. There's probably 6 numbers that most businesses, most organisations need to focus on every month. There's just 6. And sometimes we focus on the wrong things. Dilemmas come when people don't know what to ask. There's a term you may have used, I don't know what I don't know. When you get to that point, I'm not sure what to look for, that becomes a dilemma. You need to put your hand up and ask someone. Then it becomes, what do I do with that piece of information? One of the things we see on a regular basis with meetings, even those that actually do have meetings, is they're totally ineffective. There's a few cures to this, but let's just go through some of the problems. I know some of you are rolling your eyes around the audience now. There's ineffective meetings. Typically, there's no structure to them. It sounds like there's just one person in the room, just talk, while everyone else is sort of trying to look at their iPhone and sort of see what emails are coming through or messages. The timing of meeting is hopeless. They go too long, they go too short, or it's just inappropriate. The content, there's no control. Sometimes we've got the wrong people involved in the meetings. We know what you're thinking. You're sitting there looking at, what are they doing in here? They're not adding anything, or if they do talk, it doesn't seem relevant. There's a poor meeting process, and probably my bugbear is this last one. If you've had a meeting, at the end of it, everybody just walks away, and there's no accountability, there's no list of actions, no one's held to account. That's a waste of time. You've actually just wasted everybody's time there if you're not going to hold anybody to account. We think there are some fundamental issues that relate to this. Number one, how does a business actually work? If you're a division or if you're a not-for-profit that's listening to this, the same issue applies. How does money come into the organisation? Where does it get spent? How does it go out? A key issue then becomes, how does it actually run? How does the business or department actually run? This next bullet point here was actually a quote that came through on one of the surveys. People get promoted and they're expected to know these things that may have happened in your organisation. So people sort of slowly shuffle their way up the corporate ladder without getting much training or instruction on what to do at that next level. Then all of a sudden they've got these positions of power. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know who to ask because that's a loss of face, and it leads to chaos.
Okay. So we thought that probably there's one or two people in the audience today who have probably had a frustrating meeting or two in their lives, and we're just really curious about what your biggest frustrations are. So Sarah, we've got a poll here somewhere.
Yes, we do. So the question is, what's your biggest frustration with meetings? And we have a few options here, so we'd like you to select as many as you like. Structure, which we've just gone through, timing, content, the wrong people at the wrong place, poor meeting processes, and Peter's favourite, the lack of accountability. So we can see those results coming through in live time, and in a few seconds we'll have a better indication as to what everyone's biggest frustration is, and it seems to be quite common, the bottom two. What are your thoughts on that? With the survey and everything that you guys conducted, was there one particular theme that sort of overshadowed the other?
Absolutely being reflected right here. So poor meeting process and lack of accountability kept coming up again and again in the survey.
Yeah, the accountability one is a huge one. Quite often we can see what it is that needs to be done, and people might even admit that, yes, I know I need to make a change or implement something different, but then they leave the meeting and they get consumed with whatever the busyness is, and then nothing happens. And if we don't get called to account on that, we don't have a structure for that, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, there's three parts to accountability, and it's as easy as this. What is the action or task, by who, and by when? That's it. It's as simple as that. So what's got to get done, by who, and by when? And then next meeting, the question becomes, let's look at the list. Okay, we said you were going to do this. Did you do it? If yes, what was the result? If not, why not? It's as simple as that.
Okay.
Great.
Yep.
We'll close that poll.
So we've got some suggestions on how to improve this. Number one is about meeting preparation. We really strongly recommend having an agenda in advance. Some of the benefits of that, it gives everyone a chance to let that roll around in their head, give some pre-thought to the meeting. We actually like it if you can have a standing agenda, meaning an agenda that's constant, stays the same over time. But in that, you've still got room for open discussion by having an item on there called other business. That's when other things would come up. Have it at a regular time so people know when it's going to be. My favourite is a Tuesday morning, first thing on a Tuesday morning. I don't like Mondays because of can get missed because of a long weekend, or if it's been a celebration for somebody on the weekend, or they've partied on too much, let them get over Monday. They should be doing some work. But Tuesday, first thing Tuesday morning, as in 8 o'clock Tuesday morning, I reckon that's the best time to have a meeting. There needs to be a process. This one talks to the point of having a structure. There needs to be a chair, and the chair needs to take control. My actual preference on that one is if you've got a constant group of people that meet, that the chair rotates. If somebody different takes the chair each week. What's the benefit of that? It helps other people grow and develop in the role of running a meeting and being in charge of taking, either working through the minutes and handing out the actions that need to be done, being in charge of delegation and holding people to account. Record keeping can be the biggest pain in the neck. Who wants to keep notes of meetings? And some of us are doing it on our phones, some of us are doing it on a loose piece of paper. Whatever it's going to be consistent with it, and if that rotates as well, that's a good way of people learning the process as well. This accountability process we've already talked about. What's the task, by who, by when? A very simple action sheet can be done as the last page of your notes. 3 columns, task, by who, by when. We also think that in most areas of business, financial skills are coming up again and again as being one of the important things. So financial skills we see on an ongoing basis, that this is an area that needs to be addressed. Mine as well. Yeah, look, I love this one. People do crazy things. In businesses, we see once a business might have gone through the early days of getting going and starting their way through to build up some income, build a bit of a customer base, then finally the money starts coming through. And it gets to a point where there's finally more money than expenses. There starts being a bit of a balance in the account, and then just crazy things happen. They'll just go spend the money on mad things. You look at it with hindsight and say, what were you thinking? Why on earth were you doing that? But it's not just people in business, and some of you may be in organisations or departments where all of a sudden you inherit some new division, a new business. You may see a division that's then merged between 2 other divisions. You may be in a situation where you're trying to coordinate the coming together of a whole lot of, for instance, different states. There might be different states that you're looking to pull together. What tends to happen when things are building up is that you can find yourself putting on more staff, spending money on more resources, and you find yourself committing deeper and deeper financial resources into these things. That's okay when things are going good. You need to watch out when it comes time to pay the piper. Sometimes you'll find that there's a prestige project or a long-term investment. Sometimes these can be very expensive, which is okay when things are going good. We think we can handle this and manage it. We just need to watch out when things either turn downwards in an economic cycle or when other things come out of the woodwork. We don't actually plan to do these crazy things. And some of the quotes that we've seen on the surveys, famous one, it seemed like a good idea at the time, but I like this next one. If we'd known what was ahead, we would have done things differently. Once again, we've got this image of the meerkat looking up and looking over the horizon, what's coming at us. You see, back to Jessica's point there before, we're so busy doing it. When we come out of our meetings, we go straight back to our desk, and the first thing we do is look at all the emails that we've got since we've been tied up in that meeting for an hour, which was a waste of time, and no one got any accountability or actions from it. So we get distracted. So if we'd known what was ahead, we would have done things differently if we could see what was coming. And that is possible to a great degree by stepping back and seeing what is coming over the hill. So we take on these extra commitments. We take them out in the good times, and it leads to financial stress in the down times. So what are the suggestions to deal with that? There it is again. Look ahead. What financial commitments are on the horizon? Have the right people on your planning teams. Interesting point, isn't it? Not just like-minded people. Get some people that are going to have a different perspective on things. Learn to communicate with them. I reckon in every organisation there are some people that you find difficult to talk to, and they probably find it difficult to talk to you. There's the classic again, You've got to suck it up, sunshine. They're the people that are going to drop some gems. You ever dealt with people and they go on and on? I used to work with this guy, and he would just go on and on and on, and I was his manager. And I'd just wait for him to come up with the good stuff, and he always did. There was always a great point, but I just had to wade through all this stuff and talk. So it actually came to breaking point, and we went out for a coffee, and I won't mention his name, said, hey, we need to talk about this because how I was coming across was being quite short and frustrated because the way I like information is in bullet points. Just give me the key points, give me the facts, just get on with it. The way he wanted to talk was give me talk. We ended up needing to have that conversation. I need to mention, he said he really appreciated having that talk because he was starting to think about maybe the two of us didn't work so well together. And he was starting to think about leaving. He hadn't left, but by having the conversation, we were able to work our way through and compromise. And the words did reduce. Good thing. Oh, and see that last bullet point? Definitely include a finance person in your discussion. Accountants are okay.
And speaking of plenty of words, I'm going to make Peter move on.
So what if you inherit a crazy thing? So you're working there, your life's okay, and all of a sudden you're now responsible for someone else's crazy thing. So number one, you can't ignore it. So we've got it, so let's just deal with it. Identify the impact, decide on your strategy. So figure out the plan, map out the action plan, and then implement. Hold each other to account and get on with it.
Okay. That was you too. Yeah. What is the next one? Somebody's got to speak. Number 3, not enough income. There we go. Shall I speak? Okay, fantastic. All right, the next one is businesses and organizations go broke because they don't have enough top line. There comes a point when you simply can't cut the costs anymore. You need to get some income happening. And the challenge is we make this assumption the money's going to just show up. But the truth is it doesn't unless we do something to make that happen. And I think one of the great points to remember here is we're all selling something all of the time in whatever role that we take in our organizations, especially now. So we do make the mistake that it is just going to come. Great story that I heard the other day, a large not-for-profit, you rely on donor income, some of it very substantial. If any of you are in not-for-profits where people write you big checks, you will know what that looks like. And I heard a story of somebody who had a very large donation that just had happened for years, just rolled in every year, just assumed it was going to happen. One year it didn't, and it didn't happen. Guess why? Because somebody did not invite that person who was the donor to an event, once a year dinner. That person liked to come to that dinner, somehow fallen off the list. People assumed that the money would just come through, and that was a big hole in somebody's budget. So it just shows you.
It was as simple as just not inviting them to a dinner. They lost, I don't know, $30,000 donation.
And so we do miss those things. We get so reliant on our marketing pulling the results in that we forget that sales is really a basic activity. So in particular, if you're reliant on big checks from donors or sponsors, remembering what they need to be able to continue to give you money. And in terms of customers, really every one of us is a walking advert for the companies that we work for. And if we're not out there telling how great it is, then there's a challenge for that organization right there. So we really do think that sometimes it is about selling more, even though we might not like to face that one and we think a new marketing plan is the answer. Okay, so suggestions for that one, we really like income targets and goals, and we like the idea that every organization reports to everybody something about those targets. It's not always easy to do, but you can find ways to do that.
And we're big on putting them up on the wall somewhere. On a poster somewhere in a visible place where people can see it. Not your customers or people that engagement, the clients that you're dealing with, but internal. Have the numbers up on the wall so people can see them. and measure your progress up against that.
Absolutely. And then skills training on how to generate income or make sales, if you want to say it in simpler language. We can all think about times when we've been out buying, going shopping, going to a coffee shop, going to a clothes shop, whatever it is, when the salesperson simply did not upsell, cross-sell, or even pay common courtesy to you. And I know it sounds really very old-fashioned and a bit Gen X, but really this stuff works. It works at McDonald's because it works. It works in clothes shops. Ladies know when you get offered an extra thing, you are going to buy it. Guys too, when you buy a tie, it works for all of us. So look, even in our larger organizations, understanding and getting skilled up in sales really makes a difference. And like I said before, getting engaged with your stakeholders, getting engaged with the people who are writing you checks, with government departments, with your sponsors. If you're taking sponsorship money from someone, make sure you give them a chance to get up and spruik their product so that they feel like they're getting a return from the money that they gave you.
Yeah, look, this is a big one for me. The fact that sponsors, I've been to so many shows now or presentations where someone up the front will say, oh, make sure you spend some time with our sponsors. No, they don't. They're not going to do that. And actually, people in the audience run away from the sponsors. No. So if I'm a sponsor, I'm paying you 5, 10, 20 grand. I want to have a good go at your audience. So you've got to respect the sponsors and give them a chance to make the most of that opportunity. You want the income from them, so give them a chance to spruik their stuff. I would take it as a minimum. You want someone from their organisation to stand up the front. Sometimes many times I've heard sponsors, whoever their representative, gets up the front and is almost embarrassed about that opportunity. They'll say things like, I won't take up too much of your time, I don't want to interrupt. No. Let's get into it. You're there as a sponsor. Stand tall, stand proud. If you're proud of your product, put it out there. You saw a good reason to be involved in this organisation. Make the most of it. And I think for the organisation, work with your sponsors. You'll get them back next year.
Okay, great. Next, we're going to move on to number 2. So we're getting to the last 2. Number 2 is a really great one. So we rang one of our clients and said, what do you think sends businesses broke? This guy's dealing with businesses that are a bit challenged at the moment. And he said, there's one word. It's all about pride. So here's what happens. We've all seen it, haven't we? Something's gone wrong in an organisation. We just say, why didn't they tell us there was a problem? How could that happen? Why did people not speak up? Well, so here's what happens. 2 things, really. One is that they don't understand what you're talking about, and they know they should, so they pretend they do. Like finance is a really big one here. If you're in a meeting talking about the financial state of your business and you're not quite sure what the accountant's saying, you feel like you should know, so you're probably going to not talk. And I've got to say that I have seen that so many times with the numbers things. I've seen businesses get to a point where suddenly one morning they wake up to discover $1 million worth of accounts receivable sitting on their books that they didn't know they had, because nobody in the board meeting actually asked about why there was no cash, and there was a big consequence of that. It was not a very pretty situation. So very often people do avoid speaking up because they don't know what's going on and that they want to pretend that that they've got it under control. So some of it's just, I don't know what's being talked about, don't understand the language, I'm not going to speak, don't want to look silly. Sometimes it is that things didn't work out the way that we thought. So the dream did not become the reality. You were going to be the rock star and change the organization, but it didn't work out quite as easily as you thought. And that is a huge challenge for us. Our egos don't like that very much, particularly if we don't know the answer to the problem. Or you might be afraid of the consequences. You don't want to admit that you really didn't know. And that is a huge challenge. And honestly, it's quite a human thing. We all find that difficult to admit to. But some practical things that you can do to help in this situation. The first one is, again, really improving the financial understanding of everybody in the organization. And it does make a huge difference when people understand numbers and aren't afraid of them. And that they understand that the numbers are a result of the activities that they do, and you can have them go better if you do different activity. Second one is thinking about ways to develop your communication skills. So how do you communicate with people? How do you listen? How do you speak? And how do you write? How do you solve problems? And that's really a lifelong thing. If you meet people who are exceptional communicators, generally they've been working on it for a lot of years. So I would certainly encourage you to continue to work on developing those skills.
Yeah, on that one, develop your communication skills. So a problem can sometimes be, can I put it this way, if you think your boss doesn't get it. So sometimes they don't. And because they don't get it, they're not going to tell you or tell anybody because they're the boss. And so they have to save face. So you've actually got to do a bit of a dance to make it safe for them to actually reveal or help them through it, because they're not going to, unless they're very open, they're not going to be sharing that. So you need to make a safe space for them to be able to either reveal that to you or work through to a point where they'll communicate with you.
And the last one there we've already talked about, which is developing your leadership habits. In other words, the habits around how you interact with people, the types of meetings that you have that encourage them to have a forum to speak up and encourage you to look at the issues. And that really makes a difference. Okay.
There it is. We've got the pictures of the meerkats here. We love this one. We think the meerkat represents what we should all be doing in business, and it's to look ahead. So the number one reason why business go broke or divisions is they can't pay their bills. So talking to the liquidators, and that's not a conversation that you would like to be having very often. Unfortunately, I do have been having that. The reason businesses go broke is that they can't pay the bills. Now, the irony is many of those businesses that can't pay their bills are actually profitable. So if they run their MYOB, it's going to show a profit. You'd think, if I'm making a profit, I should be okay. So what is it that causes you to go broke? Cash flow, or lack of, and the fact that you can't pay your bills. So what are the fundamentals behind that? There's only a few. Their income is just too low, or their costs and financial commitments are too high. They're the only things that can move, income and expenses, inflows or outflows. And they didn't see the upcoming financial commitments. It's easy after the fact. And sometimes talking to these liquidators, they'll say, why didn't they do something about it? Because it's easy with hindsight. When you're in the heat of the moment or the heat of battle, you're making these decisions on the fly, and things are going quickly, you just have to make a decision sometimes. Sometimes it turns out bad decision. This slide, I really like to work through with you. We think this is a very powerful picture. So where will tomorrow's income come from? Not just sales, this could be donations, this could be sponsorship money. So that dollar sign today on the bottom half of that slide, that's now. That's where we are right now. So see the word just above that to the left? It's called the result. So what we're saying in this slide is that the results that we're seeing today were caused by the actions and the activity from before. No rocket science there. So how things are right now is because of what's happened before. Let's take that forward, because the activity we do today and what you're going to do this afternoon will lead to the results you've got coming up in the next week, month, or year. So what are the suggestions? Constantly be on the lookout. Take the role of the meerkat. Activity now produces results in the future. Watch out for the early warning signs. There's about 3 or 4 indicators that will show you that there's trouble brewing and trouble ahead. So outline clearly and map out the steps to follow and hold each other accountable.
Okay, so that's the 7 things. We just reckon every one of you's probably got a favourite one. We're not going to ask you to admit any personal details, but we'd love to know out of the 7 things which are your top 2. I think Sarah's got a poll for us, and then we'll get into a couple of quick suggestions and a time for any questions that you've got.
Great. So here's the 7 things listed on your screen now. So once again, select as many as you like. List all of them if you like. But what are your top 2? And if you have any other questions for either of our presenters today, please type them into the messages box, and we'll get onto those quickly before we wrap up. We can see them coming through, and we've got quite a big response. That's also my favourite as well, number 6.
We keep moving while the poll's still going. Keep the poll open.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do that. Okay. Bye. Let's talk about that. Okay. So we think that the answer to this is really a lot to do with financial communication. And we've got a slide not quite right here. Need to move back. Sarah, can you move us back? All right. So when we're talking about finance, a couple of quick tips there. Use graphs and charts. If you are not getting graphs and charts from in your business, please get your finance person to make a picture. Makes a difference.
So just looking at that pie chart, you can see sort of the blue number just takes up the biggest thing. And in the line graph on the right-hand side, everyone's eyes just go to that big dip in the red line. What happened there? What was that about? So the numbers, when they're put into graphical form, just jump out. You can see what needs to be done.
Next.
I'm just going to close this poll for everyone now, but we can see that I think lack of business rigour has it.
Yeah.
So.
Right. All right. A couple of other quick tips. Golden rules for having things go better in your organisation. Treat others like you would like to be treated. Always a great one. Next one. Adaptability. We reckon good communicators adapt their presence to their environment. They are the ones who figure out what needs to be communicated to get the job done, and they remember that that makes a difference. And then one of our personal favourites is most of our communication is about our body language and how we sound. So given that, is email really the answer? We'd say probably not. If your phone isn't getting results, face-to-face communication makes a huge difference. So get face-to-face with the people in your organisation, especially if it's a little bit difficult. So get the finance person in the room. We think that makes a huge difference, and get them talking to you. We agree with that? Okay. I'm looking for questions here. We've got a recommendation of the brain audit by Sean D'Souza.
Yeah, we've had a few statements and comments about what you guys have been talking about, so it seems very familiar coming from everyone out there in webinar land, which is great. We have been asked to just get your opinions and recommendations on some sales courses, so I'm wondering if you guys would be able to provide us with some of your tips, and we can then include that on the recording email that we send out. So everyone, just keep a lookout for that recording email. We'll also have some details in there about some sales courses that these guys recommend. And yeah, like Peter says, treat others as they would have you treat them. That's a good one.
You'll have gathered that we really like having concrete actions. Before you get back to your work at your desk, we would love you to just take a minute, write down a couple of things that are stuck in your mind, what action you'll take as a result of that, and by when you'll do it. And that'll mean that you'll get a return on your investment for the hour that you've spent today. So that gives us less than 60 seconds to wrap up. That's a little bit of information about what we do. We can help you learn more about how to avoid your organisation or your department going broke. We'd love to hear from you at those addresses. Feel free to email us. I want to thank Sarah for hosting this today. Thank all of you for being here. It's been fantastic to present this to you. Pete?
Yeah, thanks everyone. And for having those comments come back was really great. We see that some of the work that we do is just been it's been overwhelmingly received, actually. People can see that if they can learn to communicate better about the finances, that actually has a real potential to help their whole organisation work better. So there's a couple of workshops that we run. We're happy to talk to you about those at any time.
Great. And once again, if anyone would like any additional information, feel free to contact them. What they've also been able to do, our lovely presenters, is put together a brief summary of today, just so you guys don't have to filter through the slides or watch the recording all over again, although I'm sure you'd love to hear their voices again. In the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see there's a documents folder, which I'm now highlighting. So if you go in there, you'll actually be able to see a document which is called Financial Conversations. Simply click on that to download, and then you can take that away with you. Personally, I'd like to apologise for any sound issues that you may have experienced at the beginning of the webinar. We did sort that out, and hopefully the rest of it was picture perfect for you guys. So yeah, once again, Peter, Kate, thank you so much. It's been delightful having you on today. Very inspiring and lots of really insightful information. If anyone would like any further information about what we've spoken about, please feel free to complete that in the comments field in the exit survey, which we'd all advise you to complete. And if anyone would like any additional information on webinars themselves, also feel free to give us a little bell, and we can help you. So thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we hope to see you at future webinars. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.